guys, how's it going? Hope you guys enjoyed that segment with Karen and Charisse. I think a lot of people have a lot to think about coming out of that talk, knowing where the future is going. And we also want to use this opportunity to remind you guys you can donate at uc2020.com. We're supporting charities providing COVID-19 relief efforts and supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. They include Inner City Arts, Black Lives Matter, Artist Relief, the Loveland Foundation, Doctors Without Borders, MBK Alliance, World Central Kitchen, House of Ruth, and Black Visions Collective. And for this upcoming discussion, if you guys have any questions, feel free to chime in on IG, drop us a message for any questions you may have. And you can check out uc-2020.com. I'll get that right today for the upcoming speaker lineup. So in our next segment, we've brought together Trevor Moawad and Jason Mayden to talk about the idea of resilience and rebuilding yourself for these difficult and unprecedented times. For those unfamiliar with Trevor, he's a renowned mental conditioning expert and strategic advisor to some of the world's most elite performers. Trevor recently partnered with Russell Wilson to form Limitless Minds, whose mission is to both optimize the performance and enrich culture within some of the world's top organizations and elite performers. In 2017, Trevor was named the sports world's best brain trainer by Sports Illustrated. From Fort Bragg to Harvard Business School, from elite quarterbacks to top-level CEOs, Trevor's mission is clear: to motivate the motivated. And his counterparty today is someone that's very familiar to us of the MAEKAN and Intertrend family, Jason Mayden. Jason is the man behind the generation-shaping enterprise Super Heroic. He's been the designer of iconic footwear for athletes like Michael Jordan, and the first to design award-winning footwear specifically for kids. Featured on multiple most inspiring lists, including Fast Company's 100 Most Creative People in Business and Ebony Power 100, he's been celebrated as one of the most inspiring and influential leaders of color, impacting and shaping our world today. We're honestly really excited to have Trevor and Jason connect and talk with us today about the resilience and the power of positive thinking in these challenging times. Let's head over to Jason and Trevor. What's going on, guys? Thanks a lot for taking the time to join us. I'm really excited about this conversation today. And I know that turn on social media, look at media today, I think these are very challenging times for anybody. And I think there's going to be a lot of interesting bits of information and insights that people are going to be able to pull from you. Jason's someone I've known for a long time. I've always looked up to as someone super inspirational, and has really found a way to communicate through words how to navigate and build movements. So welcome. I think, like I said, I'm really excited. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot, especially looking at Trevor and seeing all the great work he's done. The one thing I want to start off with is, for both of you, did you guys originally have a sense of resilience and mental conditioning growing up? Or was there a moment in time where it sort of was like a light switch and like, hey, I need to control the situation, or I need to build this up? Maybe we can start with you, Trevor.
No, I've got to defer to Jason. He's from Chicago, man. He's from Chicago. He definitely had to bring his A game growing up. So let's start with Jason.
Oh man, thank you, Trev. As you know, I'm a huge follower of your work, and I appreciate the things you're doing in the world, man, to help people navigate mentally, because that's something that is critically important to me. And it's always good to connect with you, Eugene, and the MAEKAN family and the Intertrend family. For me, it was a moment where I was 7 years old and I was on my deathbed. I had septicemia. And, Malcolm Gladwell defines this as a near miss, right? Like a moment in time when you face your mortality. And it really gave me this sense of, I would say, urgency around the things that I needed to care about and the things that I need to let go of. So in that moment, I was able to form what Trevor has coined a neutral mindset. I never let myself get too high and positive. I never let myself get too low. I stayed situationally aware and grounded. It was also helpful that, I have a military family. And so everything that they taught me from the age of, 7 on has been tactical. So from reading The Art of War is one of the first books that I truly read. And I joke where my first book was Sun Tzu when other people were reading Dr. Seuss. I didn't understand what my dad and my mom were doing. But as an adult, I found that it has helped me to control my emotions and to look at what's in front of me to make logical decisions. Because when you're laying in a hospital and you hear people talking about the temporal nature of your life and if you'll make it and if you'll be okay, as a kid, it can be scary. So a lot of it was me stepping out of my age and having to mature in that moment and realize that if tomorrow is not promised, I have to focus on what I can control today. And that really was the moment that changed my life.
Yeah, I think for me, you know, my father had left high school coaching and teaching in the mid-'70s, would go on to become one of these pioneers in the peak performance industry. You know, the self-help industry is sort of a confusing industry. I mean, I think the best, you know, sort of example that people can think of more broadly or ubiquitously is Tony Robbins. But to grow up with a dad that was some version of that was a really interesting way to grow up. And to me, it was sort of like the Karate Kid. You know, I was waxing on, waxing off, and you know, painting the fence and all that stuff. And then I think as I got older, I realized so much of the skill set I was being developed with, you know, would ultimately become very helpful at times when I didn't know when I would need it. And you know, like Jason says, going through different health challenges and just, you know, just growing up in general. But I think I had a really good understanding from a young age about the influence that I would have over myself. You know, your own influence is 10 times more powerful over you than anybody else's influence over you. And that's just the science. So wherever you're at in your life, typically, even if you come from a really good or bad sort of socially engineered family, we see people who have every break miss, and we see people who have no breaks hit. So, you know, the word for intelligent people that wear Stanford hats would be a locus of control. And it would be like this sense that I'm going to be able to have influence over my life no matter what I'm facing, versus sort of this external where you're going to be a pinball. And if you're in the right environment and right setup, you can excel and not. So I think I had a really good understanding of the influence I would have in my life. And then the role that external factors, music, movies, negative people, television, all of those things would face. I was really well equipped to understand that negativity, particularly self-induced or the negativity we bring into our lives, was a real challenge and a real problem. So, you know, I really learned how to steer clear of that and keep my mind in a more functional place to you know, to take whatever next step provides itself for me.
Yeah. I appreciate both of you guys' response. I think it's a very interesting way of looking at how people's beginnings influenced what trajectory they go on, where they are today. And there's something I wanted to ask you, Trevor, in terms of the work you do. What's like the outcome? You know, if you're here right now, like what is the outcome you try to foster or create for people that sort of go under your tutelage or work with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, my whole goal, you know, 18 years in the sports world is a really interesting place to develop yourself, because the athletic population isn't looking for Tony Robbins. They don't want help. There's no BS. You know, like mindfulness doesn't exist in sports. You know, meditation doesn't like any of those things, that radical candor, all those things that are killing it in Silicon Valley don't exist. So, you know, you have a very unique population. But my aim has been to help this group get better. So in the process of 18 years in the NFL and college football and in the special operations community, I learned that the best way is to help everybody. And if we demystify the mind, and we affect more people by starting at an easier level, not just so we got a bunch of people trying to impress each other or these business guys making $800 million walking off their jets in slow motion, you know, all these things that this industry has become. My whole goal is to try to serve other people. When you live in the sports world, you know, you don't exist behind the scenes. I mean, for years, rotating weekends between Alabama football and Florida State football at 1 and 2, people would say, "Who are you?" And I'd say I was an intern from Reebok. I probably should have said Jordan. So I think more broadly, the goal is, you know, Maria Shriver had called me a few years ago President Kennedy's niece and said, you don't even have social media, you don't have a public presence, and yet you've got something sort of interesting that you're teaching, but nobody can find out about it. And I said, well, the people who need to can. And she said, well, instead of 150 athletes, your aim should be 150 million people. I didn't agree with that. I still don't. But I think the idea of demystifying, like when we're going through something like we're at now, and everything that we're seeing in the human experience socially right now, and then certainly this recent healthcare challenge, we should be equipped to understand we can't make what we're dealing with COVID and other things necessarily better, but how we handle it, we can make it a lot worse. And if you listen to how the military refers to what we're going through, they call it a healthcare challenge. If you listen to CNN, they call it a healthcare crisis. And the crisis is terrifying. Challenge gives you a feeling like you can compete against it, and so I think that's the goal. How do we understand what we say, what we listen to, our own voice out loud versus our inner voice, negative versus positive versus neutral, just different types of things, which we'll only introduce here. But how can we make thinking less about Angela Duckworth shining her PhDs and more about having some, and that's not disrespectful, because meditation and mindfulness are very important. But if you don't know the basic, if you don't know the fundamentals, you can't sprint before you crawl. And we're not educating people well enough in the influence we have on our own minds. And this has been brutal. And for our athletes who've been, quarantined at home for 3 months, and in professional sports and college sports, we've seen a lot of them break down, and just not be equipped. So this is a real challenge for all of us, but I don't think it's a crisis. I think we can get through it.
Yeah. That actually leads right into my next question. I think we're part of a generation that has grown up offline, online. Like, we all know what it was like to be offline before we had computers, cell phones, whatnot. For you guys, do you look at the challenges of today and right now and look back at sort of frameworks that were created and realize that actually we need new frameworks in the digital era because things are different? The challenges that we might have had in a pre-digital era are different than the challenges of today, or can they all be sort of kind of painted with the same paintbrush? And maybe you can start with that, Jason.
Oh man, that's a phenomenal question. Something that I'll talk about quite extensively is the concept of malignant normality, where we've seen a rise in very, I would say, weaponized imagery, weaponized music that deteriorates somebody's inner voice, the ability to navigate and have discernment. And that to me is the byproduct of, not having ethical principles in the design process, because we can make anything, but should we make anything? And so, for me, I think that's where I get, very critically concerned, is because people don't look beyond a headline to read the story. They react to the headline, and they frame their reality around a very curated, very deliberate, very intentionally designed narrative that gives them this emotion, and they don't understand why they're walking around with rage or having, restlessness or having, irritable bowel syndrome, and just their body's deteriorating because their mind is eating away at their overall well-being. And so I do think in the digital age, we don't have the luxury of not living inside of the trauma. You can't escape it. Once you buy into the trauma and you see it once and you read it or you hear it, it plays over and over again in the back of your mind, and it permeates every conversation. So I think that's why, the work that I do in the design industry is to help people with the greatest battle they ever face. Like I tell my kids, your only enemy is your inner me. Like, you have to figure this out, because everything else that's happening is happening in front of you, but it's not happening to you until you accept that it's happening to you. And it's really hard. It's really hard in today's world where images frame reality. So, I think more than anything, we need to do a better job of what images we allow ourselves to see, and what things, like Trevor mentioned, the music, the book, like, I agree with him 100%. Like, if we ingest junk, we can't expect us to perform optimally when we're ingesting junk mentally, because we worry about what we eat, but we don't worry about what we see, which is the scariest thing ever. So I try to go on a digital diet, and I stay away from a lot of content that pulls me into, feelings of despair. I'm aware of my body. You know, I pay attention if my heart rate goes up, if I feel queasy or anxious, because I try to really check myself. And I think it's a healthy practice to do that when you're navigating a digital world.
Yeah. You know, I would add to that, and I think that's, you know, I just finished my first book and have sort of been able now to sort of be try to make an effort to more broadly educate and just share what we've learned. Really, I don't think you need more than a 35 IQ to understand what we're trying to teach. But what we know, ultimately in the book, It Takes What It Takes, the whole goal was to prove the power of negativity. Because nobody knows if positive thinking works. There you go. Positive thinking, all the information around positive thinking is anecdotal. But negative thinking, from the Mayo Clinic to the Cleveland Clinic, is anywhere between 83 and 100% fact. But Jason, can I go to you here for a quick sec?
Yeah.
Hold on a quick sec.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I think that Trevor touches upon that's really interesting is just like, I think there is this sort of like belief that it's not really a belief so much as what's the path of least resistance. And I think a lot of times just deferring to the negative is something that it just comes so naturally, right? And I don't know if it's a matter of being conditioned and or the ease in terms of making a lot kind of these jumping to conclusions on the side of negativity. But I think that's something that a lot of us sometimes need to slow ourselves down and rethink and kind of come to terms with that.
Let me apologize. Sorry about that. I had one of those calls from one of those people that I had to make sure they were okay. So, and you know, dealing in a healthcare issue. But what I wanted to say was, one of the things that we know is negativity is a multiple of 4 to 7 times more powerful than positivity. And when we say something out loud, it's 10 times more powerful than if we think it. So as we were in our early years at Alabama and Florida State, we realized by saying negative things out loud, we increased the probability by 40 to 70 times that they would happen. So our simple goal going into our second year at Alabama, just trying to win, was what if we could get our athletes not to say stupid things out loud? And it was crazy the difference it made in our culture, because our inner thoughts, which Jason talks about, is one of the toughest battles to win, but they don't have anywhere near the influence that our outer thoughts do, that our spoken word does. Our spoken word is incredibly powerful. And if it's negative, it's 70 times more powerful than saying nothing. And then I think the second thing is the images. People always think a great athlete like a Russell Wilson or a LeBron James or a command sergeant major in the Delta units is all these collections of things that they do. But I think what makes the most incredible athletes, male or female, is what they're willing not to do, what they're willing not to eat, what they're willing not to watch, who they're willing not to engage with. I think those are incredibly powerful things. And for 15 years, Jason, had an upfront, view on it. And I'm sure many years more, but success leaves clues. And so in a digital age right now, I think there's a military takes a course called New Media, and they want to educate people to understand who is CNN responsible to, who is MSNBC responsible to, who's Fox responsible to. They're responsible to their advertisers, and negativity sells, so they don't have a responsibility to the truth. And so once we understand that, we become, at a minimum, educated derelicts. So I think if people would be willing to because like Jason says, when I see something, 17,000 new cases in Orange County, I can't unsee that, okay? But what I can do is switch the channel, go to Netflix, go to the Jordan documentary, do whatever it is, and get myself, my mind shifted there So I'm not like, I haven't been able to watch any news at all in this window because I don't have the psychological strength to watch all this negative information relative to health. You know, for somebody who, you know, multiple times when I was younger had significant health challenges, including cancer. I like that. It's just terrifying to me. So I know that about me, so I don't engage it. You know, so I think right now, let's think about the people that are listening to this. What can you not do? What are 5 things you could not do that could change your life right now? Because everything about in the self-help industry is do this, do this, do this, write this down, watch this, meditate, go on a hill, do this, buy this app. Look, LeBron did it. This, and I think there's things you can do, but I think there's a lot more things that if you just didn't do, you'd help yourself more. Just my take.
Yeah. One thing that affects a lot of creative people is this idea of imposter syndrome, where they never feel good enough. They're inadequate for the job. They're not sure why they even command a seat at the table. From your guys' perspective, is this an easy fix, or is everything sort of like? I think for me, I look at all the things that you have said, and like for a lot of people that want to embody a new mindset, like what are the challenges to achieve that? For example, in like having more confidence as a creative.
Well, Jason, you're the one that's creative.
Man, yeah, that's honestly a great, tremendous question. Because so there's this saying with design that you never finish a design, you just run out of time. And so like designers and creatives, you know, and even people in academic settings or jobs, whatever walk of life you come from, you always walk into a room and question, you know, if you should be there, you know, if you have some sense of, you know, humility. The thing for me that I've done, and I've learned this a lot, you know, from working with Michael and Mr. Jordan or working with like Mr. Jeter, is they turn that imposter syndrome into imaginary reasons to compete. And so when you saw in The Last Dance, Michael made up fictitious, you know, data and fictitious characters, I did the same thing in my mind. I would tell myself there's some guy or girl who lives on the other side of the planet and the sun is up while I'm asleep. I need to make sure that they don't get that extra work and get ahead of me. So I was competing with some imaginary design student that I never even met, you know, trying to assume that they want to take my job instead of me feeling like I wasn't qualified to be at Nike. I was like, well, now that I'm here, I want to stay here. I not only want to be here, I want to outperform, you know, my expectations. And so I felt that in numerous environments as a creative. I felt it completely when I went to business school. Like I draw shoes and these people have sold companies for billions of dollars, and I was completely different, you know, I would say disparity in terms of what we were doing in our careers. But after a while, I realized that I had to value my unique contribution, because on the team and in the team environment, you know, I grew up playing sports. Everybody plays a role. So I figured out how to play my role really well instead of trying to figure out how to play someone else's game. And that's what, as a creative, it relieves me from that pressure of living up to someone else's expectations, because no one was going to push me greater than I push myself. And I try to carry that. I try to carry that into everything that I do.
Yeah. And I mean, think about it like this. I think, you know, your mind's kind of like a computer. And one of the experiences that I've known just particularly about exceptionally creative people, because they're hugely involved in the world I live in, you know, whether it's traditional or non-traditional. You know, I think as we fill ourselves up with negativity, and for many of us, we start to compare ourselves not to who we think we are, but who we think we're not. I don't have his skills. I don't have her skills. I don't have what they have. And then we're watching things and we're consuming things. And now with Instagram, Facebook, being married 12 years to a model and all these things, and rightfully so, because we are compared. You know, we're compared by, you know, everybody all the time. But again, our influence is 10x. So one of the things that I've noticed is use what you have. You know, use what you have. Take the gifts that you have. You know, Russell Wilson's 5'10", not 6'4". The world complains that he's not 6'4". He's maximizing 5'10". And if you use what you have, it's amazing how many people who may have more don't use what they have, and you can get them. And I think that that's important. And I think secondly, if you learned how to be less negative, you would never need to be more positive. And positive thinking is one of the things I think that's destroyed the self-esteem movement, because it's too hard. It's too hard to do. Trying to get to a positive state of mind right now in this current challenge, no way. And I grew up, my dad was one of the first authors of Chicken Soup for the Soul and the president of the National Association for Self-Esteem. So I know all about it. But this idea of neutral thinking, which we focus on, is, hey man, what's happening is real. Positive thinking many times makes us think we have to pretend right now is not happening or it didn't happen. Divorce, adversity, losing a job, furlough, challenges, or success, money, fame, kids, all those things. Like, those are instantaneous. They're a moment. They're real. But what happens next is what you do, not how you feel. And feeling like you have some control over what you do, even if it's a healthcare situation where you got to go sit in a room and hear a result of something, there's still a path forward, you know, and as someone who's experienced that, you know, keeping your mind in a place that gives you a chance to move forward and doesn't catastrophize and project a future that hasn't happened yet. A week from now, who'd have thought, not that I think I live in Manhattan Beach, I'm up in Big Bear right now, but who'd have thought 2 weeks ago before Memorial Day that everybody would be out running all over the place? I don't understand why we are. I'm not doing that, but you know, that's totally different than what you would have anticipated pre-Memorial Day. So much, you know, changes. I have faith people are going to come up with a vaccine. We've got a lot of people that are working on this, you know, and then I'm not going to let myself be governed by a Twitter account, you know, and whether it's a presidential one or whether it's somebody I'm competing against at Under Armour, you know, or something from that perspective. So, you know, a little long-winded, but how do you become less negative? Don't worry about the inner thoughts. Everybody's all screwed up inside their brain. I've been to 8 national championship games on the sideline. I've been with the guys before, but the people that articulate about it less, but what if I have to complain? What if I feel like I have to vent? There is no science that supports venting. If you have to vent, there's going to be consequences to you. So minimize what you say and what you watch. If you just did that, your gifts would be like shutting 80 web pages, and the RAM would open up and your mind would find solutions.
Well said. I'm very guilty of having 80 web pages open at once. I think we're going to move on to some Q&A from the audience. Just give me a second. First question is for you, Jason, courtesy of Jamal from Toronto, also known as JScale on Instagram. If you guys haven't seen his photos, definitely check them out. His question is, how do you get your big idea across to your team and get them to fully believe in what you're telling them, essentially?
Your big idea and get them to fully believe. That's a great question. So in any creative endeavor, the vision has to be grand enough to almost feel out of reach, but the tactics of achieving that vision need to be distilled in a way that's actionable, measurable, and repeatable. And so I give people large ideas when I say things like, hey, I want to build stronger children instead of fixing broken adults. That's very poetic, but how do you do that? Well, tactically, we have to create several different verticals of approach. So there's the footwear, there's the content, there's the experiences. And so with the team of creatives, you know, it's much like, you know, good parenting. Children don't listen to what you say, they look at what you do. And so I have to be willing to do what I ask of my team. And I also have to be committed to the problem I'm trying to solve versus the solution that we come up with. Because I tell, especially in a startup capacity, you have to be married to the problem you're trying to solve. And if you're married to your solution, you miss a huge opportunity to evolve because you learn as you go. It's an iterative process. And so I try to model, you know, the active iteration. I try to model, you know, empathy in our design process by listening and then like taking that critical, you know, feedback that I get as a leader and applying it to how I show up and perform. I always make sure I double back with employees if I make a mistake of not hearing ideas clearly or effectively. I always make sure that I give them proper credit for their contribution, and I celebrate when they challenge me. Like, I openly celebrate when they challenge me, because I tell them it's my job to take the blame, your job to get the praise. And so when you're doing creative work, people just want to feel like they've been given proper credit, because a lot of times there's this myth of the singular lone designer that, you know, creates this breakthrough technology and this breakthrough thing and no one helps them. That's a complete lie. That's a fallacy. Like, you know, if you're a leader and no one's following you, you're just a dude taking a walk. And so for me, I try to make sure if I'm leading creatively that not only am I committed to, you know, pushing forward towards that vision, which is pushing forward in the face of ambiguity, but also admitting when I make mistakes, but then measuring what those mistakes are and trying to learn from them. So we do a process called pre-mortem to kind of get the jitters out, where in a pre-mortem, we say, how can this thing fail? And if it failed, what happened? So we already have a way to eliminate the possibilities of failure so we don't get caught off guard and surprised. And it's been really effective with designers because we put our emotions into everything, and sometimes emotions cloud our judgment. And the greatest thing I was ever told was by Phil Knight. He said, the difference, Jason, with your job is if you make the wrong decision, it can impact the athlete significantly, because what you put on that product is the difference between no medal and a gold medal. And when he said that, I was like, oh, you're right. You're running a 4x1 relay in the Olympics. If I put a material on your spike that's too heavy, now it's slowing you down by 1/100th of a second, which is the difference in a world record in third place, right? Like, it's this crazy short distance that an athlete has to compete in. And so a lot of it is setting the parameters, setting the scope correctly, but being open to evolving a solution, but staying committed to what the problem is we're trying to solve.
Got it. Thanks for that. Trevor, this next question is for you. I quite like this question. It's from Carmen out of Seattle. What differences do you see in applying principles to Gen Y or even the emerging Gen Zers?
You know, I'm familiar with both generations, you know, fairly well. I mean, I think Gen Z's born after 98, 99, and Gen Y, I think born, 80, anywhere the data 80 to 2000, somewhere around that. I think from an educational perspective, speaking in multiple platforms, I think the ability to communicate, auditory, visual, kinesthetic, to grab them with technology. I think for us, let's just take like Georgia football. If the statistics are they're looking at their phone 270 times a day, and the probability is if they don't see it on their phone, they're 50% likely to believe that it's true. Then we're using that technology, making sure every meeting we do, we're following up with 4 bullet points via text message, reinforcing what the meeting was, working hand in hand with that technology. I think what we're seeing more with Generation Z is a little bit more toughness, a little bit more grit. They want a seat at the table. They want to walk into your office and say, "Hey, Jason, I want to talk a little bit about this," but they'll work. I think what we're seeing with Generation Z, in my experience, is a little bit more, a little bit of like a retreat back to grinding a little bit more. I think Generation Y has been a pivotal generation because they're so tolerant. They have their inclusiveness, their ability to get along and work with people. And I think once they have a really good understanding of the goal, they'll get after it. It's just been really transient. Like my dad was like, any job you do it for at least 2 years. Obviously, the contract works that way. So any job I started, I was committed for 2 years. So a bad day or a bad morning couldn't derail me. So I had to get through that, to sort of find my way through. So I think Generation Z is going to be a lot different, to be honest with you. I think what we're seeing with these kids right now that are 20, 21, 22, 17, 16 is something that's a lot different than Generation X, which is, I'm born in the mid 70s, and certainly Generation Y.
Yeah. Cool, thanks. Next question is for Jason. At the last Unexpected Connections event, you talked about living life through the lens of your child. Given 2020 to date, what type of world do you hope your child to grow up in, and how does the impact of what you want to accomplish impact your next career? And this is from Nydia.
Oh, wow. That is a great question. So the thing that I've been really bullish on, based on the current events that we're all seeing happening in the world, is really focusing on my children feeling comfortable within the context of the broader spectrum of their culture. So our family is Afro-Latino. So we have family in Colombia and we have family here. I was fortunate enough to find out that our roots are in Ghana and Burkina Faso. Now, in order for my children to truly experience the full breadth and depth of the cultures that they are a part of, they have to travel. They have to learn the languages and the music and the food. And so going forward, the thing that I've been really trying to do is create a process for myself where I acknowledge my privileges more than I acknowledge my disadvantages. Because if you stay in that position of pointing out the things that are happening to you, once again, that is a negative, you will operate in that space. So I tell my children, we are at an advantage by being born in this country, speaking English as a first language and being educated. Like, that's a huge privilege. And with that knowledge, what are you going to do with this privilege? How are you going to use your skill sets and your access to create? So I teach my children how to be creators. And so for the next adventure in my career, I'm really leveraging products and services and experiences to educate people about the broader communities that they come from. So if you're a Black person in the US and you don't have a great understanding of the continent of Africa, a lot of the products I want to produce is going to help you understand the narrative and the culture. Same thing with food and music. I think that's the way we should go, because when you think about art, it's much like sport. It is the equalizer, because sports is a meritocracy. You know, if you train and you perform and you prepare, you win. So if we could bring some of that meritocracy into other disciplines, other industries, that type of thinking, that type of approach, I just feel like we'll have a greater sense of empathy. So everything I do going forward is going to be about using my gifts and talents to amplify the voices of people who may feel voiceless and not seen, but in a way that allows you to truly learn about their culture, learn about the beauty of where they come from, the things that they're into. Because I was very fortunate, man, and like much like Trevor, you work with some of the most elite athletes on the planet, you get to have some great experiences, some very unique, great experiences. But then it hit me, that's not the reality for a lot of the people that come from the South Side of Chicago. And if I don't acknowledge that privilege, then I forget exactly how I felt when I was in my bed crying at night, hoping that I had a chance to leave the South Side of Chicago. And so it's about remembering why I started, remembering what it was when I didn't have what I had, and making sure that I do it in a way that doesn't point out my disadvantages, but points out the privileges, so that I can fully enjoy the cultures that I have access to. So that's a lot of what, I'm focused on in this moment and what I want to do going forward in my career.
I have one last question from the audience. This is from KGB via YouTube. With regards to the protests and the Black Lives Matter movement, how can we better engage with one another by acknowledging the issues and injustice without feeding the us versus them narrative, and move towards a more constructive mindset for creative action and collaboration?
I think it was interesting. I'm in a minority-owned company, with Russell Wilson, his brother, and their partner, DJ Eisen. I obviously have been in the sports world 18 years. So I've seen and experienced a lot. Russell Wilson actually recently came out in the media and talked specifically of an experience he had in Southern California of blatant racism in a place that you wouldn't expect it. I was with him at that moment when that happened, just 12 days after the Super Bowl, and was floored. He had just played a game in front of 124 million people, and here we're at this event where somebody tells him, to get out of the food line. He doesn't belong here. And so it was interesting, because I had a lot of people, I had never been on Instagram, and then I had a lot of athletes ask me to comment on this, and I had it was really interesting to figure out, well, what do I say? Because I worked with a lot of coaches on their press releases, and you've seen a lot of people put out different statements. But I'm a big believer in can you walk a mile on someone else's moccasins? Can you understand? And I'm half Lebanese, but I don't look it. I look like a white boy, and so I waited for a long time, and then my ex-wife called me, who's Vietnamese, and we were married for 12 years. And she broke down. She told me a lot of her experiences and everything that was going on. And I asked her to write about her experiences, and that if it was okay for me to share her experiences with this platform and my experience trying to learn, being married to her for 12 years, how to better understand the experience that she had growing up, coming from a family that came here after the Vietnam War. So, it takes each of us to make a difference for all of us. I mean, that's just the reality. And Princeton used to talk, and Emil Durkheim, the idea of collective conscience, and that we have this way where we all need each other. We feel the dissonance, and the dissonance comes from the top now, which is so, which means you have to kind of disconnect from some of this that's happening, but you can't disconnect from what's going on. Like, as much as I say I don't watch the news, I work for an NBA team, and every day we get updates on what's happening with the virus, what the rules are, what's happening in LA County, what we need to do. I know what I need to know, but I don't want to know more. So I think how is substantive things going to happen? Like when we hold each other accountable, and when $100 million is pulled off the police budget, like was from LA, that's what I'm talking about. And I think it's what we do, not what we say. It's what we do, not how we feel. And it's going to be the action, and it's going to be the action of white people over 40 years old, like me. And how do you do it? How do you figure out? A big step for me was like, I'm going to comment publicly, because I normally feel like, who cares what I have to say? Even if 3 people do, it still matters. And the fact that I shared my ex-wife's experience was helpful. So I think it starts with, there's a statement, a year from now, you might wish you started today. So start today, something, and however that is, and hold yourself accountable. No one's going to influence you like you'll influence you. And when you get you right, then you can influence a lot more people. So, Jason?
Man, I agree. I fundamentally agree. I think there's a way that we acknowledge the current pain, and then once we make that improvement for that community, which is the community I come from, that's currently being brought to the headline, I think we're able to now look and see that this is also happening in Canada with Indigenous people. This is also happening in Asia with with some of the people who are mistreated in different regions because of political differences. This is happening in the Middle East with women. This is happening in Africa with young girls. And once you start to see like, wow, I have my pain, I have my stuff that's heavy, you can start to relate and have empathy for what other people are carrying. And then once you have that shared understanding that we're all feeling the weight of something, even if we can't articulate what that something is, we can get to that collective action. Because like Trevor said, it's what we do that matters. It's not what we say. We've been here before. We've had a lot of beautiful commercials and brand statements and, optical allyship. But now it's like, what is the tangible action? What is the tangible thing that's going to help to heal? Because the thing that I express to people often is that you experience 400 years plus of unaddressed, undiagnosed, and untreated trauma, right? And if you're a fan of epigenetics, you understand that trauma is hard-coded in your DNA. You carrying this with you. It's why we have so many we're predisposed to so many health conditions. We need to heal in order to be effective. And so a lot of the healing comes from, okay, we're being heard, we're being acknowledged. Now that we're being heard and acknowledged, what do we need to heal so we can restore the community? And then once we restore the community, we can do the work for the other communities that are also being marginalized. Because for me, because of my faith, when one person is hurting, I'm hurting too. I can't simply say that my issues, the things that affect me, are the only thing people should care about. Because I truly fundamentally believe that if one of us are hurting, all of us are hurting. And so I'm trying to navigate this season of carrying the things I carry, experiencing the things I experience, but also staying resilient enough and vocal enough to speak up for the people who might get lost in this moment. Like there's a huge homeless population that's living in Echo Park in LA, right? Well, I know we're out and we're standing for the rights of Black people, but there's still God's children who are sleeping outside that are being overlooked. right? And they have been displaced because of COVID-19. They have nowhere to go. And while we're out and we're protesting, which is critically important, we still cannot forget about the least of us, the people who were already invisible prior to this moment. You know, that's where my heart goes. Is yes, I want to see improvement for me, but if my brother's on the ground laying on the street in his own feces and she's laying in the street in her own feces, I can't just walk past that and not feel compelled to do something about that also. So I think it is, like you said, Trevor, collective conscious. We have to realize that we are an organism. We are connected to the planet together. We are all part of a large body. So if one part of the body is hurting, we need to fix that so we can then go to the next part of the body that's hurting. So that's how I'm looking at this moment. Whatever we start for Black people, we get this right, we can do it for all people, right? We can help the women. We can help the people who are homeless. We can help the people who are sick. But right now, this community, the community I'm a part of, we just need to be able to get some issues fixed that are structurally wrong. And if it's improved for us, man, then we live truly in the society that we hope to live in. So I'm excited because these conversations are happening. You're not going to have the right things to say. It's okay. So if anybody on here who feels like I don't know how to approach a Black person, trust me, you're not going to say the wrong thing if you say it with love. Just say it with love. Don't worry about the right words. We don't even have the right words, you know, sometimes to express ourselves or how we feel. That's why we display it in our, like Trevor said, kinesthetically. We show it with our actions because we don't know how to say the pain is hurting us. So just have the dialogue, reach out, you know, or give somebody a hug. A hug goes a long way, you know. So not to say that a hug is going to solve anything like a Kylie Jenner commercial giving a cop a Pepsi. I don't think we do that. But I do believe that it's simple acts of kindness, simple acts of humanity go a really long way for a person that feels like they're invisible. So that to me is what I'm hoping comes out of this moment, that we see each other and we truly see each other as one and we move forward collectively.
And the only thing I would add just to that is education's a weapon. It's almost like lottery tickets. You can win the lottery with 5 tickets, but if you have 150, you got a much better chance. And I think the more you learn, from what I've seen, I mean, it is such a unique time. And I love the fact that I got an opportunity to, as soon as I saw, like, you know, how talented this creative community was, I felt like I got sent the wrong invitation to be a part of it. But, you know, it's such a challenging time. And I don't ever want to dismiss that. Like, I don't watch the news. Like, I get it. And trust me. And particularly, I was watching the Lance Armstrong documentary. Maybe some of you, like, we faced, like, I loved Lance, and all he did was lie. And I had no idea he was lying. And then all of a sudden he was on Oprah, you know, and that's the strategy we're seeing. Lie, 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 lie. And it's hard to discern with everything that's going on. So, but I will say this from the sports world, Drew Brees getting confronted, whether you follow sports or not, Drew Brees was a hero to people in New Orleans. And he came out with that flag stuff, which all that is misdirection. And just BS. And he got called out by everybody, you know, so we're not going to take it, but action is the solution to frustration. And also, as it relates to this healthcare challenge, have the respect for people to make it about more than you. You know, when I see all these people out partying and jumping around, we're not supposed to be doing that. Like, you could be asymptomatic and affect somebody that's 58 or has a heart condition. You know, like, have enough respect. Like, as we're opening back up in sports, you're only as powerful as your weakest link. If some male or female is not doing the job right, they're going to come in, they're going to bring this in and affect everybody. So, you know, just be mindful, trust the process that we're going through with that. And I think as it relates to everything going on in our community, take the next step in your own life, whatever that is. And I'll never be able to understand Jason's journey, but that doesn't excuse me from trying.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. I feel like we could probably keep this running for another 2 hours and we'd have a ton of stuff to talk about. But I really appreciate your guys' time, the insights. I think this was honestly probably going to go down in the books as one of my favorite conversations I've done, bar none. I think there's so many like interesting insights that you guys have provided. And, you know, I think that the whole community, I'm kind of have one eye on our Discord server, and a lot of people are sort of like discussing and talking about this conversation. So rest assured, your guys' words are heard loud and clear.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thanks, guys. Stay safe.